So today's video is about negotiation for technical people. Before that, why do I film a whole bunch of videos in the forest? It's because when I go backpacking or camping or hiking or whatever, I get some time. I get some time to think and I get some time to film, and I enjoy both of these activities, and that's why quite a few of my business videos are filmed in the forest. It's as simple as that. Going back to negotiation for technical people, what do I mean by that? I mean that I'm not going to talk about that kind of negotiation that applies specifically to people that work a lot in a commercial area and sell a lot of things and negotiate a lot of contracts. So I'm not going to be talking about the kind of negotiation that salespeople do. I'm going to be talking about the kind of negotiation that technical people do on a day-to-day basis. So the kind of things we negotiate in our job that are not necessarily money. Everything I'm going to tell you today applies to money as well, be it proposals to clients or your salary or whatever, but it's not specifically about money. It's about negotiating deadlines, negotiating technical solutions, negotiating plans, negotiating estimates, negotiating ways of doing things in general. And the first reaction you might have in hearing me talk about this is, why do we even need to negotiate? If we're talking about technical things, then we should be relying on facts and logic, and negotiation should not be required. And I think that's a common misconception, because that's not the case. Yes, in technical aspects we do have facts and we do have logic, and we should always use that. And when facts and logic give us a clear option to follow that is clearly superior to every other option, there's nothing to negotiate. But frequently that's not the case, especially when you work with more dynamic projects, more complicated things. You just don't have enough facts, or it's not feasible to get all the facts or all the information to make a purely mathematical decision, and you end up with multiple options that are all kind of equal in a way. They're different, they all have their pros and cons, but depending on how I look at them, each of them could be a feasible option. And then we need to make, as a group, as a team, a decision about which option we choose, about which way we want to go. And the process of making that decision beyond what the facts tell us is a negotiation. Because when it comes to doing something that is complicated, there's always going to be some ambiguity, there's always going to be some uncertainty, and the conversation of deciding of how we want to handle that is a negotiation. When you think about negotiation, we usually have two big fears that come up. And the first fear is the fear of upsetting the other people. If we don't have a lot of experience negotiating, we fear instinctively that if we try to negotiate, if we ask for something that hasn't already been agreed, or if we propose an alternative solution to something, or that might cause the other people to be upset and get angry about us trying to negotiate. And I think this fear is largely unfounded for two reasons. One is that it's usually way bigger and more dramatic in our head than in reality. What we have to say, what we want to negotiate, it's usually not such a shock to the other people as we fear it may be. And two, as long as obviously you do it professionally and generally speaking politely, which I'm sure we all want to do it, from my experience, this process of negotiating things actually strengthens professional relationships, doesn't weaken them. So the people that negotiate things with good intentions with their business partners, they don't end up upsetting those business partners or making them feel like you're too greedy or whatever. They actually strengthen that professional relationship and bring it to a whole new level. And it's actually a good thing to do if you want to improve your professional relationships, to be willing to negotiate things and initiate negotiations. Obviously, I'm not talking about exaggerating things or negotiating every little whatever, or just always be negotiating something, but within reason. I think it's a very positive thing to do, and it actually contributes to a better work environment where problems are easier addressed and solved, and decisions are made in a more healthy way than by avoiding negotiation. And the second fear people have when they think about negotiation is the fear of not happening, the fear of not reaching a deal. What if you propose something, what if you ask for something, and despite your best intentions and your best efforts, you just can't make them agree with it, and you don't get the deal, you don't get that yes at the end. What do you do then? Well, the answer to this fear is simple, and it is that you will get a lot of no's. Negotiation is not one of those things you do only when you are 100% sure you're going to reach a deal. Negotiation is one of those things you do even when you don't reach a deal, and you have to get comfortable with a no. Okay, I had an idea, I had a proposal, we tried this, apparently we're not going to agree on it, no problem, thanks so much for your time, we'll talk later about whatever else we're doing. Or, thank you so much, have a great day. It doesn't have to be any more awkward than that. It's just, you don't have to be fixated on getting a yes. And if you're in sort of a position where you actually need that yes and you have no other alternative, yeah, that's a difficult position to be in, but we're going to talk in a minute about how not to get into that position. So these are the two fears. Then we have to talk a little bit about demystifying negotiation. Sometimes people, when they think about negotiation, they think about this very tense psychological clash of minds where every little body language aspect and every little word you say where you don't and every little detail matters, and it's like a meeting of statespeople discussing about nuclear arsenals or whatever. And it's not like that. It's not one of those confusing magical situations. Negotiation is a very straightforward process. Negotiation is just another form of communication, and just being clear and direct and straightforward is going to get the job done. And the first thing for that is to prepare. Before you go into a negotiation, you need to have three things very clear in your head. One is, what do you want? What is your objective? What are you trying to achieve? And try to be specific. If your objective can be quantified in any way, if it's money, timelines, deadlines, estimates, whatever, have numbers in your head that are your target. The second one is to know your limits. What is the lowest level you are willing to accept, beyond which the deal is not worth doing for you? Again, if you have numbers, try to quantify it. Have a range, have an ideal number and have a minimum number. And have that minimum number very clear in your head before you go into the conversation. Because if you actually sit down and start negotiating without having your limits clearly defined, especially if you don't have a lot of experience negotiating, and especially if you feel like you have to get the deal and you have that urge to sort of make everyone happy and reach an agreement, then you will get lost completely in the conversation, because the other people are going to say this and that, they're going to propose this and that, they're going to try to calculate everything on the fly, and that will be very difficult for you, especially if you don't have experience, and you're going to end up accepting things you will regret you have accepted. Have very clear minimums, know your limits, and never ever, no matter what they do, what they say, go beyond your limits. And if you find that you're not able to reach an agreement that is above your limits, then just take the no, thank them very much for their time and wish them a good day and walk away. Next thing to do is to state your position clearly. There's this sort of myth, or I don't know if it's even a myth, but many people seem to believe that the best way to approach a negotiation is to sort of be very silent and not say many things and not give away your position and try to make the other person give away their position. And yeah, there's some truth in that if you're engaged in a certain kind of negotiation that is based on a very high information asymmetry and there's a lot of secrecy and hidden agendas. But that kind of negotiation is not usually the kind of negotiation we have to face in our professional contexts on a day-to-day basis. There's some secrets, so to say, we all have, but not a lot of them. So there's actually more advantage in just being the first to speak, being the first to sort of lay out the groundwork for the negotiation and sort of stating, this is what I'm trying to get, this is what I'm asking for, this is what I'm offering, this is what I think the right price is, this is what I think the right estimate is, this is what I think the right solution is. So by being the first to state your position before the other parties state their position, you actually get an advantage. There's some psychological reasons for that, and it's going to frame the conversation into that direction. So unless you have a very specific reason not to do it, I think you should always be the first to state your position anytime that is an option. Then Learn to stop talking. Learn to be comfortable with a silence in a meeting, with a silence in a conversation, and don't feel that urge to fill in the void. So for example, if you say something, I think this project is going to take 3 months. And your potential client says something like, oh, that is way more than I thought, and that is completely unacceptable for us. What do you do now? The right answer is probably say nothing. The urge you will feel is to sort of make them happy. Say something like, I'm sure we can find a way. I'm sure we can look at it in a different way. I'm sure we can do something. Just say nothing, because they haven't said nothing. They haven't said anything specific. The only thing they said was, oh, this is too much. Okay. You're still being quiet and you're letting them follow up. Let them tell you the number they're willing to pay. And then we can have a conversation about what we can do for that number. We can look at the scope or whatever. But don't feel the urge to react to everything. Don't feel the urge to eliminate any tension in the conversation. When you proposed your estimate and they said, whoa, that's unacceptable, there was a tense moment to some degree. Probably not as tense as it feels to you, but it was a tense moment. And your first reaction, if you're not experienced in negotiation, will be to remove the tension at any cost. Like, oh, I cannot allow the tension. This is negative feeling. I have to get everyone back smiling and I have to keep everything cheerful. That's a mistake. Let the tension be. Learn to navigate the tension. Learn to work with the tension. It doesn't have to be all smiles, and that's not how it should be. I'm not saying you should always look for the tension, but the tension has to be addressed. In any negotiation, there's a kind of a inherent conflict. And by conflict, I don't mean like a personal conflict, but we do have many times different expectations from that negotiation. And that difference in expectations will have to be sooner or later addressed. And most of the times you won't be able to address that difference just with smiles and cheerfulness. There will be moments like this where there will be a mismatch into what you're willing to offer or accept and what the other party is willing to offer and accept. And that mismatch is to some degree a tense moment, and it has to be allowed to exist. And you have to get comfortable with those kinds of tense moments. So when the client reacts like, oh, that's unacceptable, you just don't say anything. Give them a few seconds. Let the silence be. Let them follow up with their counterproposal or whatever. Learn to do this kind of stuff. The other thing to do is remember this principle: nothing is for nothing, right? There's a dirt bike in the background. I hope it's not too loud. So if you're saying, I don't know, my estimate for this project is 3 months, and they say, oh, that's too much, and you say, oh, okay, maybe I can do it in 2 months and 3 weeks. You just give them a week for nothing. Never do that. And I don't mean never do that because you should be tough and you shouldn't be willing to compromise. I mean never do that because it just doesn't make sense. If you said 3 months and they're like, ah, we can't do that, then you just say, okay, 2 months and 3 weeks. What does it say about your initial proposal? It says that either you artificially made it too large, and that, you know, affects your credibility for any future proposal, or it says that you're just unsure and you just came up with a number, and that again goes back to your credibility, or it says that you're so, I don't know, they can just push you around it anyway, and again, that's not a good thing. So when you say something, you say this is going to take this much, this is going to cost this much, this is going to involve this and this and that. I assume you have a reason behind that, and I assume there's a thinking behind that. So if they say that's not good enough, don't just, you know, give them something for nothing. Like, oh, okay, I'll drop this, just like that. Because that means that your initial proposal was not a solid proposal. It was just a made-up fantasy. And it's the kind of negotiation that I think doesn't make sense. Some people do this like, okay, let me ask for 10 and hopefully I'll get 7. I think that's just a waste of time. I think you should have a clear position. You should understand what you need, what you want, what are you willing to accept, what you're not willing to accept, and just put that on the table. And the other people say, okay, that's too much. Then try to engineer a different deal, by all means. Okay, I can do it faster, but, and this but is very important, but I won't be able to do this, or I won't be able to do that, or it won't be as fast, or it won't be as whatever. So everything is for something. Nothing is for nothing. Everything is for something. Third, be ready to walk away. And I'm going to give you an aviation analogy for this. In aviation, the pilots are very, very well trained, and they have this mentality of the missed approach. What does that mean? When you're coming in to land into an airport and you're going through the landing phases and procedures, if at any point during that landing procedure something happens, there's a problem, or something is not how it should be for whatever reason, even if the reason is not clear at that point, they will abort the landing and they will execute the missed approach procedure. Why do they do that? Because if the pilot gets fixated on I have to land no matter what, I have to land no matter what, they get into this kind of a mental tunnel, and they will tend to ignore problems and to accept risks they shouldn't accept. And a lot of accidents happened because of that back in the day. And now this whole missed approach procedure and missed approach mentality is drilled into pilots' heads. And the missed approach procedure is not just, oh, let's abort the landing and just fly wherever. The missed approach procedure is a procedure. It's a very clear procedure. And every airport has it very clearly defined. And when the pilots come in to land somewhere, when they prepare for their landing before it even begins and they brief each other about it, they not only talk about how the landing will go, they actually discuss, okay, what is the missed approach procedure? So we go this way, this altitude, this speed, whatever. So it's all ready in their head, and they have that kind of mentality. Anything goes wrong, anything, if they're not comfortable about anything, okay, missed approach. And the missed approach is not like a big decision, it's not a stressful decision, it's an easy decision. And you should have the same kind of mentality when you go negotiating. Pilots say that landing is a bonus. If we land, amazing. If not, we'll just execute the missed approach and come back and have the conditions ready. Getting to a deal, getting to an yes, it's a bonus. If you get to an yes and you actually reach an agreement in that negotiation, amazing, awesome. But if not, missed approach. What is the missed approach in your negotiation? I mean, it could be as simple as thank you very much. We're not going to be able to agree on this, but thanks for your time. Talk to you about something else soon. Have a great day. Or it could be more complicated than that. I don't know. But prepare your missed approach before you go in for a landing, before you go for the negotiation. Know your limits and know how you're going to get out of it. If it doesn't go anywhere, if you feel like you're not going to get a successful outcome, you don't have to feel trapped in there. And the way to not feel trapped is to have that missed approach in your head ready and activated and get out of that situation. And no deal is better than a bad deal. No deal is better than a bad deal. Okay, but what if you need the deal? What if it's your only option? What if you're desperate? Well, if you're desperate, there's not much you can do. I mean, you can prepare, you can try to get as much as you can, and if you're lucky, you will, but fundamentally, if you're desperate, you're going to have to accept things you wouldn't otherwise accept. How don't you get desperate? Well, negotiate early and negotiate frequently. One of the myths about negotiation is that negotiation is this very staged-like and very all or nothing kind of clash of minds and confrontation where there's like one big meeting and you go there and you get out with a yes or a no, with everything or with nothing. No, negotiation is an iterative process. Just like we write code and we use continuous integration on the code, we use continuous integration on the negotiation. If you need something from your manager and you try to get it in every other possible way and you don't negotiate because you're afraid of negotiating or you don't like negotiating and you leave the negotiation as a last resort, and when everything else fails, you go on a Friday evening, 5 minutes before your manager goes home, trying to negotiate that, and you have no other option but to somehow, some way get them to say yes, you've put yourself in a corner. You've put yourself into that desperate position, and now you're going to have to accept a whole bunch of things you may not want to accept. But if you negotiate early, if you negotiate a little bit of Tuesday, if you negotiate a little bit of Wednesday, then you're not going to be in that desperate position. And the early phases of the negotiation are very low pressure. The first time you broach a subject and you bring something into conversation, you're not even trying to get them to agree on it. You're just socializing the idea. You're testing their reactions. You're testing the waters. And you have that luxury because you've started early. Negotiation was not your last resort when everything else failed. Negotiation was part of everything else. As you formulate your ideas, as you gather your facts, as you test your hypothesis, concurrently with that, on top of that, alongside that, you already start negotiating. The early phases of negotiating, the low pressure phases of negotiating. And that's how you reduce the likelihood of finding yourself into a bad negotiating position. Negotiate early, negotiate frequently. So, to summarize, negotiating is a critical skill even in technical environments, even in technical jobs, because when we work with complicated things, beyond the facts, there's always a degree of uncertainty and ambiguity, and the process of making a decision in situations of uncertainty and ambiguity is a process of negotiation. Starts from the facts, but the facts are not enough. We need more than that. 2, get over the fears of negotiating, get over the fear that you will upset people by negotiating things, and get over the fear of, I have to get to an yes. Learn how to get a no, go looking for the no's, get as many no's as you can, learn your missed approach procedure, and get comfortable with that. Then prepare, know what you want, know what your objective is, know what your limits are, never go below your limits, have your limits and your objectives prepared before the actual negotiation, and as clearly and as quantifiable as possible. State your position clearly, be the first to state your position, lay the groundwork and the framing for the negotiation. Don't try to be secretive or mysterious, state your position clearly. Learn to be comfortable with the tensions that arise in a negotiation and the silences and the pauses and all those situations, and don't feel that urge to just make everything cheerful and make everyone happy. It's not about that. Nothing for nothing. Everything is for something, never give something for nothing. Nothing is for nothing. Everything is for something. And last but not least, negotiate early, negotiate frequently. Treat negotiation as a iterative, incremental process, not as a one big showdown that everything lies on it and it's, either great or bad. Negotiation is a process. Negotiation is just another form of communication. It's not a mysterious thing. It's as simple as that. That's it.